Okay, good evening everyone out in our audience and our folks home on TV watching us. Welcome to the regular City Council meeting, February 24th, 2015. Tonight we're honored to have Scout Troop 117 from Shingle Springs who are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. They're here to, as part of they're working towards their merit badge for citizenship in the community. So with that, could we all please stand? Okay. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good job. Ms. Zito, now we'll have roll call, please.
Mayor Borelli.
Here.
Councilmember Clarici.
Here.
Vice Mayor Patton.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Here.
Thank you. Announcements, presentations to the public. We have an announcement from Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would like to read a press release that I prepared, and this will be available tomorrow for the press that I will get to them also. At the City Council meeting on February 10th, 2015, the City Council received a status report on the Western Placerville Interchange project referred to as WPI. This is an ongoing project that has been in various stages of design and construction for many years, and in the planning process even longer. The project is broken into phases, which includes the recently constructed on-ramp at Ray Lawyer Drive. The next phase will complete an off-ramp at Ray Lawyer Drive. Questions have come up regarding the applicability of Measure K to this project. Measure K was adopted by a vote of the citizens of Placerville on November 4th, 2014. The vote was certified by the City Council on December 9th, 2014, which became the official date of adoption of Measure K. Section 9217 of the Elections Code states, if a majority of the voters voting on a proposed ordinance vote in its favor, the ordinance shall become a valid and binding ordinance of the city. The ordinance shall be considered and adopted upon the date that the vote is declared by the legislative body and shall go into effect 10 days after that date. No ordinance that is either proposed by initiative, petition, and adopted by the vote of the legislative body of the city without submission to the voters or adopted by the voters shall be repealed or amended except by a vote of the people, unless provision is otherwise made in the original ordinance. Based on this code section, the ordinance adopted by Measure K took effect on December 19th, 2014. Western Placerville Interchange Project contains 2 roundabouts that have been approved by the City Council. Several alternatives were considered as part of this project. The final supplemental environmental impact report and the preferred alternative were adopted by the City Council on June 24th, 2014. While the city is continuing to research and investigate this issue, it is the city's position that Measure K does not apply to the WPI project for several reasons, including 1, the project was approved on June 24, 2014, prior to the adoption of Measure K, and 2, the WPI project is part of a state highway interchange which falls within the jurisdiction of the state of California and not the city of Placerville. All plans we prepare for this project must be approved by the city, or by the state, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. I have an announcement. I had the pleasure of presenting a proclamation to Rayleigh's supermarket stores. Last week they celebrated their 80th anniversary, and for those of you that are not aware, their first store was in Placerville. This is where they got their start, and they have grown, and they've been a wonderful partner. They've been a wonderful member of our community. They're always there to help, and so they had a rather impromptu last-minute celebration. We were going to present the proclamation here tonight, but it was decided when they decided to have their little get-together down there to have me go down there and give it. They were all dressed in white shirts and black pants, and they had little red bow ties on, and it was kind of reliving the back to 80 years ago. And all the employees were there, and they had cake and popcorn, and they were in a very festive mood, and so it was a great presentation. It was a lot of fun. Okay, that said, next we have closed session report. We have none. We didn't have closed session tonight. Adoption of the agenda.
Move for adoption?
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ceremonial matters, none scheduled. Public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. State law prohibits the council from acting on items not listed on the agenda except by special action of the City Council under specified circumstances. The mayor reserves the right to limit the speaker's time to 3 minutes. The mayor will recognize you, and when you come to the microphone, please state your name for the record. You are not allowed to make personal attacks on individuals or make comments which are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy. Please give any written material presented at the meeting to the city clerk for public record. At this time, I'll ask if we have any written communication.
None this evening. Mayor.
Okay. Oral communication. Anyone from the audience have anything they would like to come forward and discuss with us?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members, Mark Acuna, Placerville. I had a couple of items that I'd like to share with the council, especially in light of the fact that all of your dedicated staff members are here. First, I'd like to, on behalf of my area, which would be Parkview Estates, Country Club Drive, Airport Road area, I'd like to thank the engineering department and the folks that were involved in the very recent replacement of some very old and worn out wooden streetlight poles with some very attractive, very appropriately styled all steel streetlights. They appear to be appropriate as far as shielding and that type of a thing. And the contractor that actually did the work was just awesome. They were in front of my house for less than an hour. So great job on whoever was involved with that, working with PG&E. The engineering staff did a wonderful job on that. I was remiss in the last meeting in not coming forward and thanking Public Works Department, specifically Mr. Ewell, again on behalf of the Country Club Drive Airport Road area. He had coordinated with Foothill Tree Company, I believe it was, to have that entire area trimmed. And now we're talking about an area that normally would see snow, and there's various issues there during the winter and summer seasons. The work that Steve coordinated out there has given the city and the residents at least 5+ years of safer intersections. We have areas we can now park in. If we ever are lucky enough to have a snowstorm again, we'll actually have a place for people to park and the snowplows to drive. So again, thank you very much to Mr. Ewell and the contractor that he had involved with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acuna. Great news. Anyone else care to come forward? Okay, seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council. Consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion by roll call vote unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. The reading of the full text of all resolutions will be waived unless a council member requests otherwise. Anyone on the council like to remove anything, talk about it? Okay, would anyone in the audience care to come forward and comment on anything listed?
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
It's been moved and approved. Do we need a roll call? Okay.
Mayor Borelli,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Patton,
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici,
Aye.
a little out of alphabetical order, Councilmember Wilkins.
Aye.
Okay. Ordinance, unscheduled, public hearings. Okay, 12.1 is discussion, action items. 12.1, this is rather lengthy, so bear with me. Approving a consulting services agreement with Domenicelli and Associates, DNA, in an amount not to exceed $71,190 for design engineering services for the Pardee Big Cut Sacramento Street Area Water Line Replacement Project, otherwise known as CIP 41109, and authorizing the city manager to execute same, and approving the local project sponsor agreement with the Sierra Fund, TSF, establishing the terms and conditions for receipt of the grant funding and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement, and approving a $950,000 budget appropriation from the State Water Conservation Grant for said project, and approving a budget appropriation in the amount of $425,000 from the Measure H Fund as city matching funds for the said project. Mr. Rivas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our city engineer, Ms. Neves, will give the staff report.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Just wanted to catch up with you about this project a little bit. Back in 2004, the city decommissioned the bypass for the water treatment facility located off of Pardee Lane. And additionally, we identified some lines in the Pardee Way, Big Cut, Sacramento Street, Gilmore, and Chamberlain Street area that were deteriorating in need of replacement. With that, we had some available funding and were able to contract plans and design documents up to 90% complete by early of 2012. In addition to that effort, the city became aware of potential funding through the Consumnes, American, Bear, and Yuba Rivers Planning Group, which, as we all affectionately refer to them as CABI. And through this program, the grant administrator that CABI uses is the Sierra Fund. And they, between CABI and the Sierra Fund and the city, we got together and prepared a application to the Department of Water Resources for Prop 84 Round 2 grant funds. We were notified in February of 2014 that we were successful in obtaining the money, and now we are basically ready to move forward. The original estimate for the replacement of the water lines in those areas of Pardee, Big Cut, Sacramento, Gilmore, and Chamberlain was roughly originally around $1.9 million. The money that became available through CABI and the Sierra Fund covers up to a portion of that, so it covers approximately 60% of the project. So we're going to, we'd like to move forward with using the available funding to take care of the more critical items, and that's where that comes from. So when we set up the agreement, when we went through the process and got the grant money from, sorry, let me back up a little bit. The CABI agreement, part of the requirements is that we enter into an agreement with the Sierra Fund as the grant administrator, and that's also one of the items that we're asking for approval from council this evening. So at this point, we have 90% design complete. The firm that originally completed the design was Somas, and their local branch went out of business. But luckily, we've retained contact with the designer of that project, and he has now moved over to Domenicelli & Associates. For continuity of the project, we felt it would be, and plus they have proven history with the city of performing great on design jobs for us. We thought for the continuity of the project, we would stick with the same designer, and they provided a estimate to complete the design through contract documents. And it was a fair number, and so we're requesting permission to grant the consultant services agreement to them. Now, as far as the CABI agreement, we're requesting approval to do the agreement with the Sierra Fund that will enable us to then get the funds from Department of Water Resources for Prop 84. The amount that we would be receiving from DWR is the $950,000, and it does require a local match, and that's where we've requested the help from Measure H in the amount of $425,000 in appropriation. In addition to that, we did receive some news a little later on. This last summer, we were notified that we've actually been successful for an additional round of funding for the Prop 84 grant, and we will be coming back to council for additional items on the same project. So we are only able to fund about 60% right now. We'll be able to get about another 20% in a few months, and we're going to try to include it all as one project when it goes out to construction for efficiency and bidding efficiency. That concludes my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
That sounds complicated.
Yes, ma'am.
But I read it, and I read it, and I reread it, and I think I understand it. Anyone on the council have any questions for Rebecca concerning all this? Yes, Wendy?
I just have one question. Great report. You helped us understand a kind of complicated issue, but if we hadn't had the Measure H funds, where would our matching grant have come from, matching funds?
I don't have an answer for that.
Wow.
Maybe Dave can help me out.
Yeah, maybe-
Your
Director of
water,
Finance.
your water enterprise fund would have to match it. That would
Okay.
be the
So-
appropriate, yeah.
I just want to point out that this is a perfect example of our, the citizens' money, our taxpayer dollars at work, and how well the sales tax initiative that was passed, how effective it's been in helping us reach our goals to shore up our infrastructure, and the Citizens Oversight Committee that has been a part of that has done just a fabulous job in making sure that the funds were used, in the manner in which that they were designated. So just kind of want to highlight that, how well that has worked. I'm really grateful that we have those funds so we can finish and take advantage of these grant opportunities, which is nothing short of remarkable. So well done.
I think I would like to ask Rebecca to explain matching funds. It's not exactly dollar for dollar, right? I mean, it's a percentage, and
Yes, it's a percentage of the contract, and in the contract with the Sierra Fund, it outlines the percentage participation for each local agency, how much they have to participate. Coincidentally, funds that we've already spent to date on the project qualify under our matching funds.
Oh,
And so we're actually
great.
getting a little bit more bang for our buck that way.
Yeah.
They're allowing us to retroactively use money that has already been previously spent up to the 90% design as part of our matching. So
Wow.
that's been helpful.
that's great news. And I'd also like to reiterate what you said. This started in 2004. You talk about projects taking a long time. But I guess all the years, and it's been worth waiting for, because I think we're coming out okay. Did you want to have something? Okay.
Does staff time or any of the sort of non-monetary elements also go towards match? Do they allow that, or does it have to be a hard match?
It was a little subjective, but my recollection is not all of it.
Not all.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Would anyone from the audience care to come forward and comment on this item?
Sue Rodman, Measure H. Hooray, we're getting forward on this. We did vote for this on the Measure H committee, and I can tell you, since this is my water line, I had to recuse myself from the vote because it is my water line. I can tell you that it breaks on a regular basis and wastes quite a bit of water for us. So getting this one fixed is a good thing. It's a 12-inch line, so when it breaks, it really can send a lot of water down. So, hooray.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council.
I move that we approve the agreement with the Sierra Fund as the CABI grant administrator and approve consultant design agreement with Domicelli and Associates as recommended and appropriate $425,000 from Measure H funds.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mayor Borelli,
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Patton,
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Aye.
Okay, next we have another long one. This is 12.2, approving a construction contract with, say the name for me?
Vince Aguirre Construction.
Okay, for the Main Street Rehabilitation Project, Phase 1A Water Line Replacement Project, in the amount of $663,500, and approving a consulting services agreement amendment number 2 with REY Engineers Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $88,300 for inspection and construction management services related to the construction of Main Street Rehabilitation Project, Phase 1 Water Replacement and Sewer Rehabilitation, and authorizing the city manager to execute the same and approving a $400,000 budget appropriation from the Measure H Fund for the Main Street Rehabilitation Project, Phase 1 project, and authorizing the city manager and the city engineer signatory authority for the supplemental work contract item for the Main Street Rehabilitation Project, Phase 1A Water Line Replacement Project. Mr. Ribas, or is Rebecca going to do this? Okay.
I'm pleased to present this item to you all. At the last meeting, we missed you, Councilmember Patton. We provided an update on the bid opening for the Main Street project, and Vince Garrett did come in under the engineer's estimate with their bid, and we've been working with them to iron out the contract and get the contract moving forward and starting this project on time as promised. And so I'm pleased to say that we are finally at this point with this project. As outlined in your staff report, at the meeting in January 13 of 2015, the council approved moving forward with the concept of doing the Phase 1 construction contract and bifurcating the project enough, and as well as approving the amendment with REY for the additional design services to bifurcate the project. And the reason why we bifurcated this project is based on public input from the public meetings we received and also coordination with all the businesses on Main Street. We were really nervous about negatively impacting them, so we've done various measures within the contract to protect that, and one of the measures is this project will be constructed using solely with night work, and as a result of that, you have to have inspectors out there. And so as we are a little short-staffed on the third floor, we would like to have REY do the inspection services and the construction management. They have past experience at this and on this exact same type of project, and so I think that they would be valuable. We will be coordinating with them. I will be on the 24-hour contact emergency list, and so we...
But you're not going to be there all night, right?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I have 2 little girls I have to look after. So, but yes, REY has entrusted an inspector and a resident engineer to us who has excellent experience on various types of projects, including federally funded, locally funded, and state funded. I met with him. I feel very confident in his abilities, and I'm very excited to be working with him as well as the rest of the REY staff who are in the audience as well. And so moving forward with this contract, we are requesting approval of the construction contract with Vince Garrett. We've checked their references. They come back stellar. They've done great work, and they appear to be very proactive and want to get going on this project as much as we do, which is great. And then also requesting the budget appropriation for REY's inspection services and construction management, and for the budget appropriation for Measure H as well, that will finalize the funding. We did meet with Measure H on January 22nd at the regularly scheduled Measure H committee meeting, where they did appropriate the funding for this project. And then the fourth item is the supplemental contract or supplemental work contract item for the Main Street Rehabilitation Project. This is an item that I have seen and personally used on other public contracts. This helps address any kind of unforeseens in the field. You all may recall the work that went on with the utility work on Upper Main, and we have an old city and there's a lot in the ground, and even on our best attempts and efforts, there's no way that we could possibly know everything that's under that street. And REY has been excellent at doing their due diligence as far as the design, but in the interest of how short the contract time is and the nature of the night work, I added this into the contract in hopes that basically this will help facilitate the contract on a more timely basis. But it's, obviously everything when it comes to any kind of changes to the contract change orders or anything, we will of course be providing updates and feedback to council. And that concludes my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, anyone have any questions? Rebecca?
Mayor,
Yes.
could I add to that?
Yes, you.
Rebecca, you did a great job. Thank you. I just want to emphasize that last point that Rebecca made, and I we added a paragraph in here to explain that normally the city manager has authorization only up to $5,000. In this case, by approving this supplemental work contract, you're approving up to $50,000 total, not several $50,000.
Yeah, don't go
but
crazy,
only
Cleve.
one. But I normally, we had a lot of discussion with my finance director about this, and there was a certain level of comfort with it on our part. But I do feel that in this scenario where we are trying to get this work done quickly and at night, and having that comfort level when we run into something, be able to say, yes, immediately that's approved, rather than thinking about it and saying, what will the council think about this, et cetera, being able to make that immediate decision, I think, will be of value on this project. It doesn't say that we will do this in the future. It depends on different circumstances, but in this case, I think there is some value in considering this item. So,
Well, I don't know how everybody else feels, but there just is a time when we have to do this, and if we can't trust you by now,
And we're not doing our job.
we're not doing our job, right? So, anyone else have anything to say? Okay, anyone?
Question.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
All right. I suppose it's for you, Mr. Morris. In the wording of the resolution, it says that the Main Street Rehabilitation Project includes Center Street for the water drainage sewer utility system improvements. Does that include up to Highway 50, or does it just go as far as City Hall, or perhaps Rebecca or Pierre?
I believe
probably.
it goes all the way to Highway 50, to the entrance to there. So
To the
we'll-
entrance?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, that's
The-
excellent.
It ends at as you turn right onto Center Street from Highway 50 going eastbound, the water ends right there in front of City Hall, and that's the limit of the work.
Okay, that's great, because that is in such bad shape right there. Yeah, okay, that's great. I know I know this is maybe not a part of the actual project, but, well, it is, I'm sorry, it is a part of the project. Have the challenges been resolved behind the Herrick Building? I know that as far as you were working with the property owners there to
Go ahead, Rebecca.
That's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. It gives me an opportunity to mention that we are having a public meeting on
Okay,
March 4th.
great.
Yes, the engineers, REY did meet with, and a city representative, met with the building owners of that piece, and we discussed various options for the intersection. All that work, it's related to the roadway improvement and the actual flat work, the concrete
not the
work.
water sewer line replacement?
Yes, ma'am. There, it's in
Okay.
phase 2, which we will be
Okay,
coming
great.
back to you. So you guys are going to get really tired of hearing about Main Street by the end of this year,
Oh,
but it's
no,
going to
we're
get built
not.
and it's going to be beautiful.
Okay, great, super. No, just real excited about this, and just once again want to highlight that the long-awaited Main Street repavement has been possible, once again, because of Measure H funds, in allowing us to do the water sewer line replacements, which is, once again, the sales tax measure that the citizens voted to improve our infrastructure. So that's at work once again, as well as the city has been diligent in saving our $200,000 we get from the RSTP funds. And we've saved that for 2 years to be able to do this. So our city staff has been very diligent to be able to afford this much-needed repair, and I know we're all real excited to get it underway.
I know.
Yeah.
You know, Wendy, your question about the, where it enters Highway 50, isn't there I recall hearing there's a historical area there. Is that being addressed with this? I honestly did not know it was there until it was brought to mind. What was it? A couple years ago, I think we got a report, so I'm curious.
We haven't particularly looked at that. That's in the planter box, I believe, right in the corner of the
the
Center
parking
Street,
lot.
the small Center Street parking lot. So it's technically not part of this
It's not part of-
project. It wouldn't
okay.
be affected necessarily by it, but it is something we've looked at to maybe highlight in the future. Stan Morris is here. I could probably tell you more what that is. but-
Well, it just
but
might be a
it's,
time, I mean, with
it's-
all the machinery and
Right.
everything that's out there, it might be the time to, I don't know. I don't know where, but anyway, I just thought I'd ask.
I
so.
have a question.
Okay, yes, John.
Since we have these young men out here scouting, maybe you could give us the Reader's Digest version of this historical place, because I am not familiar with it. 2 seconds, 1 minute, go.
I'm sorry, Stan,
I'm
can you
sorry
help
to
me?
put
Can
you
you tell
on
me
the-
what that one is? I don't remember what, there's a
Carol,
rock
do you
there
know?
that has a plaque on it, and
It's
is
the
it
ha-
for the
yeah,
Hangman's Tree?
It's the Hangman's Tree
That's for the
plaque.
Hangman's Tree, okay. I
It's
thought
it's
that
on the rocks like the sheriff's one out here.
Right,
Or
right.
out by Old City Hall.
Yeah,
So
and it's
there's a
plaque
rock in
there,
that parking lot. Okay.
in that little planter box there with a plaque on it, yeah, so.
Yeah, it's the Hangman's Tree site.
And it's just amazing how many people do not know that it's there. It's just, and it might be the
It's
time to.
impossible to get to, that's why.
Oh, okay.
It's very
Okay.
difficult to get to.
All right. Anybody else have anything?
I do.
Okay.
It's kind of along the same lines as Councilmember Thomas, and it has to do with what they refer to as RSTP monies. And I'm hoping maybe, Rebecca, you could help inform not only myself, but the rest of the audience as to where those monies come from and how we happen to come by so many. It's great that we saved them, but it comes from an interesting source, so I was hoping you could.
I can speak partially to it, but I might have to refer to Mr. Warren's expertise.
Oh.
He's very good at this. My understanding of it is that it comes from EDCTC, which we have multiple board members among us on the council, and it's a state, and I'm going to see if I can get this right, Regional State Transportation Program. No, that's not
Close, surface, regional surface transportation.
Sorry. It's basically it's federal money that's given to the state, and then the states give to the funding bodies, EDCTC, SACOG, et cetera, and they set up agreements with the various agencies, and they come up with a calculation factor on how they distribute it amongst the local agencies and the county and everything. Currently, the amount that goes to the county is 400 and some change.
483, I think.
Yes, you're right. Yes, thank you. And the city of Placerville gets $200,000 a year based on a calculation that was developed in 2011. Mr. Morris was lucky enough to witness that. And so every year we get $200,000. And so we've been putting that in our piggy bank. And as we come along to these projects that are so desperately needed, you know, the last time Main Street was touched the construction was 1971. So it's been 44 years. And so, you know, we waited and we put it in our piggy bank, and this is how we were able to move forward with these types of projects.
I think I was actually looking for more fundamental of where the money come from. I know it comes from EDCTC and the state and the feds, but the feds can't give anybody money unless it takes it from someone else. And what I'm looking for is the bottom line, where that money comes from.
Yes, Councilmember Patton. This is actually RSTP exchange. So you have RSTP, federal RSTP, which is restricted, highly restricted. And this is exchange RSTP, meaning that the state receives federal RSTP in exchange rather than circulating the federal RSTP to agencies. They will actually exchange that federal revenue for state transportation revenue, which provides better flexibility for local agencies like
So is this coming from the price I pay for gas?
It comes from, yes.
Thank you. That's basically what I was after. But I think it's important that we recognize where all these pots of money come from, because they come from the taxpayer, every single one of them.
And the point about it being exchange money should not be lost on people, because as Mr. Warren pointed out, the federal money really has a lot, because if you use federal money, then you have to go through federal process, which means there's environmental process at the federal level, and that can be very cumbersome, especially when it's a lot of money to us, but it's a relatively small amount of money overall, you know, a couple $100,000, and it would be eaten up rather quickly if you had to go through a lot of this process. So the ability to exchange money and then get that, what we used to call clean money, back is really important. Plus, the number of things you can use this other kind of money are much greater. So they don't have the kind, I mean, they still have to use it for
Well, you don't have the restricted.
but you don't have the restrictions on it, so that really shouldn't be lost on folks. This is one of the benefits of the EDCTC, is that they actually go out and do this kind of thing. It's the Transportation Development Act. We can talk about it someday.
Cleve?
Just one quick comment, since we mentioned those numbers of the county receiving $483,000 and we get $200,000. That seems a little disproportionate, but the county receives other
They-
monies, which are
yeah.
called rural or urban RSTP funds that we do not get. So that's why there's that difference there.
Right. Okay. I'll open it up to the public now. Anyone would like to come forward?
Your Measure H representative here again, Sue Rodman. This is one that we had to pull and postpone some other projects so that we could allow Measure H funding to go for this project, but we felt like this was probably one of the most important projects in Placerville, and so we gave it wholehearted support. And I'm really glad to see this happen.
Thank you. Anyone else care to come forward?
Marion Washburn, City of Placerville, and I have a materials question. The last segment of Main Street that was repaved from Bedford to the police station, what's done with the material that was partly particleized rubber, and the point of that was to reduce sound impact along the corridor, and it seems like that's proved pretty valuable because of the conversations and the street life that you're trying to nurture on the street. So I was wondering if that was a part of this package or not. And as I recall, maybe we had special funds that contributed to that material that's not necessarily standard material. So anyway, it seems like it has proven to be a successful material, and I would hope that people on Main Street would be advocating for it, or there would be funds available for it. Thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. It's a pleasure to drive on that street up there. It's just like, Cleve, do you have an answer for that, or?
Rebecca, do you want to answer that? Yeah.
Okay.
That is not included in the package that we're actually trying to approve tonight. Tonight's the water line. The Phase 2 project associated with the roadway improvements, that is coming a little bit further, a few months later, and it's certainly something that we can look at. It is currently not in the documents, but it's something that we can take a look at.
I know when we were talking about this, I requested that, and I think I was told that it does add to the cost.
It does.
Quite a bit.
Rubberized asphalt is more expensive.
So that
By a
might
fair
be
amount.
a factor, but gosh, I agree with Marion Washburn that it would be wonderful if we could.
We can also look at the state's used the tire grant funds. That's where we got that.
Oh, that's
before.
what it was. Okay.
However, there's limits. You have to have a certain size project in order for that to qualify. So that was one of the reasons I'm not sure it will qualify, but we can look at it.
We'll try, huh?
So.
Okay, anyone else care to come forward this time? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council.
I do have one more comment, sorry.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the
Oh, good.
council so you can comment.
A couple of property owners and business owners downtown flagged me down today, and they couldn't be here tonight, but they wanted me to be sure to convey to our city staff what a stellar job this whole process has been, and they've been incredibly pleased with the public workshops that REI and Matt Boyer and staff has done to engage the public, to inform the public, to work with the PDA, the Downtown Association, to really, hear what will work for them, and then tailor this entire project that will meet our property owners and our business owners' needs, so we support our local business. And they've been people that have been critical of the city or have just been incredibly complimentary of this, and I wanted to pass that on tonight because I think it's really been an outstanding process, and this is a fabulous project.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Madam Mayor, that we approve item 12.2, adopting the resolution to approve construction contract with Vinciguerra Construction for the Main Street rehab with items 1 through 5 as supported by staff.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote, please.
I'm sorry, for clarification, was that Councilmember Thomas that seconded it?
No, Wilkins.
Wilkins, okay. Mayor Borelli.
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Patton.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Aye. Can I ask the clerk a question?
Sure.
Susan, in regards to the opportunity for our city manager to approve up to $50,000, that is part of the this, but it's not for anything else, right? I mean, it was pretty much verbalized pretty good in the staff report. And then maybe Finance Director Warren, that $50,000, is that in the contingency? Is that where that lives? If they should have to, and then is there enough for one or two, or just up to that $50,000 limit? Up to?
Your action tonight ensures funding for the entire 50,000. So if you need to, if Cleve and Rebecca need to tap into that 50,000, it's available. And this is separate from your other contingencies and reserves.
Okay, so it's separate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Item 12.3, excuse me. Adopt a resolution approving a proposal from Byrne Engineering Services, Inc. to perform a structural analysis of historic City Hall and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute an agreement for said services in an amount not to exceed $24,750. Approving a $15,489 budget transfer from the Reserve for Economic Uncertainties for the said project. Approving a $3,408 budget appropriation from the Water Enterprise Fund contingency for unforeseen expenditures for the said project, and approving a $5,853 budget appropriation from the Sewer Enterprise Fund contingency for unforeseen expenditures for the said project. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I was thinking about this report today. About a year ago at this time, I was looking at historic City Hall and trying to discover ways or find ways that we could repair it, do what we need to that. And at that time, we began the process, as you recall, regarding the sales tax measure, and that was one of the things we were looking at, a possibility for that. So I'm back again a year from now. We're still in the same position, and I have concerns about historic City Hall and its condition and where it is going. And one of the concerns we have is the structural stability of the building. We have reports, a report back from 1986, I believe it is, which tells us that there are some structural problems with the building. And so as I looked at that, though, that report tells us that the cost to fix it may be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. So that's a pretty big range in order to try to plan something based on that. So what I brought before you tonight is a proposal to have an engineering study done on historic City Hall to determine exactly what needs to be done to it, and even put together a preliminary plan of how that would be done, how it would be repaired, and what the cost would be, a potential cost to do those repairs, to get it in a manner where it could then be leased to someone to do tenant improvements if we did that work. I worked with and called several structural engineers to see who was available to do this. As you know, the study back in the 80s was done by Gary Gates Engineering Service, who is a local structural engineering firm here in town. I did talk to Mr. Gates, and he actually referred me to Lori Byrne as someone that he said would do this job better than he could. He said it's not the type of work that he really does. And so he recommended them. And then later, before I had actually called Lori, I talked to our city engineer, Rebecca Neves, who also recommended, well, let's use Lori Byrne. She does good work. So I got a couple of recommendations, and I called and I met with Lori Byrne, who is here in the audience tonight if you have questions for her, and had her give me a proposal. We walked through Historic City Hall and looked at it and had her give me a proposal of what it would take to do this work to a point where we can then, I believe, make a decision. Do we keep the building and continue to search for funds to restore it? Or at that point, it would be easier for us, I believe, when we have a more solid figure of what it would take to repair the building, to go out if we decided to sell the building at that time, to take it to somebody and say, this is the sale price and this is based on this much restoration that will be necessary to get the building in a usable condition. So with that, what you have tonight is a proposal from Byrne Engineering, which includes her proposal of the $22,000, and then I added a contingency onto that, $22,500 plus the $2,250 in contingency, for a total of $24,750. In reviewing this with the finance director and determining ways that we could fund this, we broke it down to these three separate funds based on how the breakdown of funding the maintenance and et cetera of Old City Hall has been done, or historic City Hall has been done in the past. So if you have a question about that, Mr. Warren or myself can answer those. But based on this analysis, we've come up with this. So you have some options here. We could look at different ways to do this. We could hold off and wait till we have funding, as we do not have any funding to do the actual construction, obviously. This would only do up to showing what we need to do, and we have an idea of what it would cost. We can continue to look through grants and other sources to restore the buildings. We could look at potentially another sales tax measure somewhere down the line that might help fund it. And there's other things we may do, or we could leave it as is and again attempt to sell it as is. That's another option that we have. But at this time, my recommendation is that we use this money, spend this money to at least perform this level of work so that we know what is required to restore historic City Hall, and then we can make a further decision at that point how we want to move forward with it. So I'll be willing to answer any questions that council may have.
Questions?
Wendy?
Sorry. Quick question. How does the Water Enterprise and the Sewer Enterprise Fund apply to this? Is it a plumbing analysis, or how can we use those funds for this work?
That's a great question. And basically, back in 2005, there was an analysis done by my predecessor who looked at the benefit of the Water Enterprise Fund and the Sewer Enterprise Fund from City Hall. So in other words, the services provided by City Hall and staff, the engineering staff, the utility billing staff, the city manager, so on and so forth. The use of the building provides benefit to both the Water Enterprise Fund and Sewer Enterprise Fund. And so at that time, the analysis showed that the Water Enterprise Fund's fair share was 13.77%, and the Sewer Enterprise Fund's benefit was 23.65%, and the remaining being the general fund's benefit. So what we did is we took those percentages and allocated the cost of this project based on those percentages. And I think if we were to do this analysis today, I would suspect the allocation to those two enterprise funds would actually be greater. So it's actually a fairly conservative allocation.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Any other, John?
What's kind of the shelf life of this thing? So we go out, we get a report, they'll tell us what the issues are. So then kind of how long does something like this last before it might be
Stale? I'm going to ask Lori to come up. Maybe you can help me answer that if that's all right, Lori.
Well, if you get, hi, I'm Lori, I'm a structural engineer. If we can get the cost data relative to today's construction costs, we can always escalate those costs into the future at any time. You know, there are construction cost indexes for labor and materials, so.
That's fine, and that's kind of what I thought, but it's good to hear, because you know, one of the things is if we're not going to be able to do anything with the building now,
Right.
You know, you do something today, and then you find in 5 years from now you're going to do the same thing over again. So it's good to know that these things can be kind of.
You can project them forward
Yeah.
to any date.
Thank you very much.
I have a question for you as long as you're standing there. Are you going to, well, I know you're going to do it like roof, building, structure, walls and stuff. Are you also going to recommend, what I keep hearing is that the roof is leaking badly. And, I mean, that's so important because obviously if the roof is leaking, it's destroying the structure, et cetera. So would you be giving a recommendation of what to do first, or if we, yeah, a priority, just to save it? I mean, you know, we just have tried so hard to save that old building, and to allow it to deteriorate because of a roof leak or something would be sad.
The first phase of our study is kind of a top to bottom look at that building. We will be in the attic. We'll be looking for signs of water intrusion in the roof and in the basement area. There's a large structural component that we will be doing analysis and looking at retrofit alternatives, but we have a task within this proposal. Have you seen my proposal? Okay, so there is a task in there that talks about all the non-structural provisions. If the city were to lease the building, we'd need to look at, you know, do we need to provide fire sprinklers? You know, electrical upgrades, plumbing upgrades, egress upgrades, you know, for life safety. So we do have a task in there where we're gonna assess, you know, we're trying to get a complete cost together for you, not just the structural costs. So we'll be meeting with the fire department and the building department and all of the relevant agencies to assess a complete cost. And of course, if the roof is leaking, we'll be able to see that in our investigation and development of the as-builts that we'll be then using to project the costs, to assess the costs.
Okay, so I think you answered my question, but I just, in other words, I guess kind of what I'm asking for is like a stopgap to prevent any further deterioration until we can do all the other things that I'm sure you're going to find. In other words, something to, you know, just hold it for, you know, temporary,
Well,
until we can get.
Yes, and we will, I'm sorry, ma'am.
No,
For
go
interrupting
ahead.
you.
I'm sorry.
Okay. As we do our investigation, if we notice anything that we feel is going to lead to the further degradation of the building, we'll be in contact with the city manager and city engineer through our sort of monthly assessment of what's going on with that building.
Okay.
To let them know if we have any recommendations to preserve the integrity of the building as is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions for Ms. Barron?
I mean, it's not really a question, well, I suppose it is to Finance Director Warren, or maybe to Cleve, City Manager. It has to do with, so the city has owned this building for how many years? 115?
Long time.
And City Hall was moved in 2005.
Yeah.
And we set a price of $675,000 to sell it at one time. Where did that number come from if we did not have this study done then? I mean, or did we have a study done then?
I might ask our city attorney to report that, because
He was the city
working there, he was the city manager at that time. Do you mind, John?
No, not at all. Way back then, we had an appraisal done on the building, which actually reflected a significantly higher amount than the $675,000. It was listed with a broker for probably the better part of a year or more without any real offers coming forward. We relisted it with another broker. It was their recommendation that the price be reduced to the $675,000. That's how that price was arrived at. The report that Cleve refers to in his staff report, nobody was aware that it really existed at that time. It was learned after the city entered into a lease agreement with the company referred to in the staff report. And of course, at that time, everybody was surprised, including the lessee. And that was because the report was so vague in terms of really what it would cost to fix it and the conditions. That was one of the reasons the lessee backed out of the lease at that time.
And what did the leasee back out?
That was after, what was it, about 2000?
Well, we entered into it in 2012, so he wasn't into it more than maybe a year.
A year, I think.
13.
So 2012 to 13.
So I guess my underlying concern is that we are attempting to fund an unfunded project, we're just starting a budget cycle, and we're using contingencies and/or reserves that, I mean, yes, we've had this building in our inventory for a while, but I don't see it, and I don't mean to necessarily disagree if the roof is leaking that we shouldn't fix it, but I don't see it as an emergency. And I would rather this come to us in the budget process rather than in one meeting where we're asked to spend more of our reserves because we can't figure out how it should fit into our annual budget. So this would ask the council to consider, you know, how we could do this better in the future for sure, because this is not a new item. It's just not a new item. Anyways,
If I may speak to that point, the assessment from Gary Gates in '86 and then D&Z's assessment in 2012 of the building, they state that the building is a potential liability in its current state. So I just want to make sure that you're aware. It does have some significant structural issues. So of course it's at the pleasure of the city to decide what to do with that building, but it does bear looking at. From a liability standpoint, there are some really large cracks in the two-story masonry walls. So it's important to note.
Thank you. Wendy?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. I would agree with Councilmember Patton's assessment. I think you certainly bring up an excellent point. This would be a good idea to bring up during a budget cycle. However, what has challenged my thought on that is that we are just forming the Blue Ribbon Committee to look at the historic courthouse and bringing historic City Hall into that mix. And I think we have an obligation to give that committee all the tools they need to succeed. And I think they can't do a proper assessment of what would go well with that in conjunction with the courthouse if they don't have all the facts and figures. And because of that, I do support the recommendation to move forward with this. So they have the analysis they need to succeed, so they're not spinning their wheels. So.
Mayor, can I maybe help answer that too? Councilmember Patton, first I apologize for bringing this in that manner because I agree 100%. This should be done as part of a budget item. We didn't budget it last year because I was kind of in hopes and thinking that we would maybe pass the sales tax measure, which had funding to consider, or the council could have considered funding this project with that. And that's probably the reason this is coming back at this time. One of the options you have is to consider waiting until the budget process and consider it at that time. So.
Well, I'm going to give my 2 cents. I'm on my 3rd term now, and we've been talking about this since my 1st term. And I've gone through, and I, at one time, was the Lone Ranger in not wanting to sell it. I think it's a precious commodity, and I think we'd be short-sighted to not to try to preserve it. And it's such a big part of historical downtown. And I agree with Wendy that I think it's an integral part of the Blue Ribbon Committee and what their plan, and whatever they're going to come up with. I have no idea. But I just think that, and I've said it many, many times, I think that is just such an important corner. And I think we need to go further and find out where we stand, you know, what we're facing. So. Anyway, at this time, oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to make a comment that I think this is an important tool, no matter what we choose to move forward with with the building, and as far as the options, performing number 4, but also definitely number 2, and maybe even number 3, but starting with the study.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it for right now, Ms. Byrne. We might have some more questions for you. So at this time, I will ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to make any comments on this.
Sue Rodman, Placerville resident. If the city decides to do this structural study, the cost should come entirely from the reserve for economic uncertainties, especially since the city no longer is using these buildings. When people are paying a 1/4-cent sales tax for getting a handle on our terribly neglected water and sewer systems, and Measure H is to supplement, not replace, city water and sewer budgets. I seriously protest taking funds from water and sewer for a structural analysis study. The water and sewer funds are badly needed for their primary purpose, the water and sewer infrastructure. Please do not misappropriate those funds for the structural study. The balances in both the water and sewer contingency funds are inadequate now to handle unforeseen expenses that we could have in that system. The other thing I would like the council to consider is that the cost proposed in the last council meeting of February 10th, item 12.3 for a lease purchase agreement of $706,518 with almost $100,000 of that in interest for debt service. So we're talking about almost $750,000 there to purchase or replace equipment that's really needed for a functioning community and avoid air quality fines, needs to be considered, along with now adding another $25,000 for a study. I would go with Councilman Patton and said this ought to be part of the regular budget process. I'm very concerned that we are piecemealing out budgets that, and especially when it comes to water and sewer, those are not adequate now. If we have a major break somewhere, we will be hard pressed to do anything about it with the contingency funds that we already have. So I would seriously stress that if you decide to do this, at least take it out of the economic uncertainties budget and leave the water and sewer out of it.
Thank you, Ms. Rodman. Anyone else care to come forward and comment?
Good evening, Mark Acuna, Placerville. Perhaps, in having been a member of the council and having had various city managers explain the methodology that they use with Mr. Warren's assistance to come up with how they percentage out which funds should contribute, perhaps and a little further explanation would be helpful as to where they arrived at taking these pieces from the different accounts. I certainly can't argue that everything is always on a shoestring with us. It seems that that is just a way of life. I would ask you to give this great consideration. It would be always nice, of course, to be able to have somebody donate the services of a full-blown engineering study, but from what I'm hearing this evening, this is exactly the information that we did not have in 2005 and 2008 and 2011. Studies suddenly appeared. We didn't really understand to what scope and what detail could we trust those, because none of that information was ever the city's. The city never had the control to do exactly as you're suggesting this evening and call out with a qualified individual to perform your study. And I think it's very appropriate to remove the unknowns, because the scenarios that I had a reason to be involved in this particular project when we tried to lease it and tried to sell it, those were all good faith acts at that time. Again, with the little bit of information that we had, we just moved city staff out and then discovered that there were these huge cracks in the walls. We're lucky that we moved when we did. The building, is a real keepsake, and it's a real, the city is a caretaker of that. And I think taking the steps this evening to get yourselves and get the community the information so that instead of just guessing, we will actually be able to address whether it's the Blue Ribbon Committee, some other future group that maybe wants to look at what happens when the courthouse leaves, to a number of the surrounding buildings that are currently in legal use, if you will. This could be part of a bigger project. We'll then be the agency that has the current and accurate information. So I would encourage you to try and find the appropriate place to get the funding and then move forward with this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to come forward?
Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council. Do I have a motion?
I would just like to ask the council once again to consider item number 5 as their option to have this particular item be part of our budget hearings that are, I don't even know when the first hearing is going to be. I don't have it at my fingertips.
We'll be having a, excuse me, a CIP, Capital Improvement Program, and Capital Outlay Workshop. I believe it's the 3rd Tuesday of March. That would be our first discussion regarding items like this.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
But I think a little more discussion, I think, is in order. If we were to do it as part of the budget cycle, though, then the budget would be approved and, start, next July, and I just think, I really worry about the Blue Ribbon Committee and getting them on the right foot. Maybe sending them down a whole course of investigation and thought that is not going to be applicable or doable or feasible. I think we would be totally remiss if we don't give them every tool to succeed.
I want to go on record as saying I am not at all opposed to this. Not at all.
No, I
am
realize that.
absolutely opposed to, I think Ms. Rodman referred to it as piecemeal
I get
budgeting. And I think it's the wrong way to do it. I think we're setting ourselves up. We can't possibly know the whole picture if we don't look at it as a whole picture. We just can't, because there's so many parts to running the city, and the budget is a best guess shot. I get that, but to me, this is just not an emergency. These reserves are used for certain specific uses, and a structural study. Maybe we should find some money somewhere to do this, and that's okay. But I don't think this is the right way to do it, and I sense that I don't have the support, so I don't.
I have a question. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off. It's for Cleve. You've been working on the Blue Ribbon Committee. How close to are we to having the committee formed, their first meeting scheduled? I mean, we're already March, June, July. It doesn't seem too far of a stretch if we're not too far, and if we don't even have a committee.
Right. The application closes on March
13th.
So it's a couple of weeks into March before that, and then we need to go through the process to select the committee, which I'm assuming will take probably 2 or 3 weeks because of the process we're looking at least.
Okay.
So we're probably into at least the first part of April before the committee could be seated if everything goes right. And then, first meeting set up maybe late April to start the process.
Okay.
So to follow up on that, if we were to make this as part of the budget cycle and we were able to find the money and appropriate channels to fund this, when could we likely bring this back to the council to approve a contract to do this structural analysis?
Well, there's a couple of things, I suppose. I mean, technically what you would do is bring it back once your budget is adopted, which would be June. The first meeting in June is generally when we try to do that. So it could be part of that same night, actually, assuming you approved the budget that night. We could ask you to approve that at that first meeting in June. Another option may be, well, perhaps maybe even after your March capital workshop, maybe you determine that this is a priority that you want it to be. It's possible, but I can't say for sure. It just depends on how that discussion goes at that time, but probably not until your first meeting in June, I would guess.
Actual adoption's typically the second meeting.
Second meeting,
but it could be adopted the first meeting.
And then how, I don't remember reading in here, how long is this whole process of the analysis due to last? When would we, I guess, have the results back? I don't remember where that was.
I'm trying to remember.
Let's see. Sorry.
Lori, you can answer that the best. How long will it take?
Probably 3 to 4 months.
3 to 4 months, okay.
Is my guess.
10 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
And And June is not the best time to start that type of a study, being that it's sort of peak construction season. So potentially 6 months if we start it in the summer. You know, because we're in the field a lot in the summer.
So if we did approve this tonight, it would be a shorter process because
I
you're
have some
not as impacted.
I've blocked out some time. I've got some people lined up, you know, to try to work on it in March and April before things get too hectic.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a comment, one more comment. I think that Mark Acuna hit it on the head when he said that we're removing unknowns, and that's really important. And given the 6 months, if we wait, in addition to the, I would love to do this as part of the budget, but with this new information, I would be more in favor to just do it tonight.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would. I'm going to move staff recommendation, including, do you want me to read them all, or 1 through 4? Approve a proposal from Brun Engineering Services to perform a structural analysis for City Hall and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute the agreement for said services in the amount not to exceed to $24,750. And I'm going to ask that we keep the sewer and water in there also. So also numbers 2, 3, and 4, approving $15,489 appropriation from the Reserve for Economic Uncertainties, and $3,408 from the Water Enterprise Fund contingency for unforeseen expenditures, and approving $5,853 for Sewer Enterprise Funds contingency for unforeseen expenditures.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Actually, may I make a comment?
Yes.
Okay. I do have a concern about the water, just make a note that I do have a concern that I think that's stretching the intent of the water and sewer enterprise funds. I do share that concern. And I don't know if you'd be willing to amend your motion to take that out of those funds.
Because we just spent $800,000 for Measure H tonight?
But,
yes.
you know, okay, before, and I have a comment. I'm not too sure that Mr. Warren made it clear, because I think this question we kind of asked, why were those two funds considered? I think I agree that water and sewer is a very important issue on that old building, so maybe that's how it all came about. It's part of the parking lot, it's part of,
if that could be explained a little further, was it because we did inhabit it, or because of the infrastructure challenges with that building? If you could clarify that.
Technically, the old City Hall provided benefit. In other words, the old City Hall provided office space for your engineering staff to maintain, design your water and sewer systems. It also provided office space for your utility billing staff to issue bills and collect billing revenue. It also provided office space for your city manager to manage your overall water and sewer systems. And I can tell you that, you know, part of the reason why the old City Hall is in the condition it is, there wasn't enough money coming from all the benefiting funds to maintain it properly. And so we're playing a little catch up here, and it's actually very little catch up, but it's a little bit. So I believe the actual impact, the benefit to the water enterprise and sewer enterprise fund is actually greater than these percentages, the way we allocated the cost of this project. So it could be greater to water, greater to sewer than it actually is presented tonight.
Can I comment? I understand, and I think this could be justified. However, I will say from my point of view also, Dave and I have, Mr. Warren and I have discussed this, that it is a gray area. Yeah. And if the council felt that they wanted to allocate it all from the general fund, I would understand that. It is a gray area.
And following up on that, I think we need to be incredibly diligent with our sales tax measures. And we no longer occupy that building. And I understand, you know, what you're saying. It is a gray area, and I want to be uber cautious of our taxpayer dollars to make sure that there is a very strong nexus with what our public approves and how we spend the money. So if the motion is not amended, I will not be voting for it. So, even though I very much support that we move forward with this. So that's just my 2 cents worth. So.
Okay. I was just going on how he said it could even be higher if we reevaluate it today. And so it seems like we're kind of striking a balance, you know, a little give and a little take. So.
Okay, so are you, oh, Dave?
Can I make another comment real quick?
Yes.
If the city was ever to liquidate the building, sell the building, which I know that's not something you're considering tonight, I would say it would be appropriate that a equal, comparable percentage of proceeds from the sale of the building. That's another way of looking at it. So, although you're talking about possibly putting money into the building from the Water Enterprise Fund and Sewer Enterprise Fund, those two funds would benefit from the value of the building being liquidated or even being rented out, leased to another party. So it creates value in the asset that could potentially generate revenue for the Water Enterprise and Sewer Enterprise Fund.
We have a tenant in half of the building now. Do we provide water and sewer, or are they paying a portion?
The actual, full disclosure, the lease revenue is counted just in the general fund. However, it's just a fraction of the building's square footage.
But yes, they do pay utilities.
They do pay utilities hard.
So
Yes.
So I guess in some respects, we could look at this as an investment into the building from those funds, and then they would be paid back in like kind. So if you take those funds out, not that anybody would do this necessarily, but then we would say, then we're just not going to put any of the money that comes, presumably if money comes out of the building, either through sale or through some more beneficial use to the city and to the taxpayers, then that money would not be going back into either one of those two enterprise funds. So we can make, we're kind of getting into some weedy area here, but I think that you could make that claim. If we take it all out of the general fund, then every dime that comes out of the two buildings then goes back into the general fund, which is, it's okay for me as a strategy, but, otherwise, if we take a certain portion of it, then we look back at the enterprise fund and go, okay, fine.
So if this were to be leased, would 23% of the rent go to the sewer enterprise fund, say? And then 50, is it percent for percent? Or if it were to be sold, would they get 23%? Would it be divided up equally, the same as the way we're doing this? Like, how would we come up with that? I know this is the study, what we're taking it, and the renovations would come from a little bit from here, and it wouldn't be the same. But at what?
And that's kind of what I was getting at as to why I inquired whether they're paying, utilities, and is that going to our utility fund? So,
So if the city leased the entire building, you could choose to, within your budget adoption process, to allocate those proceeds from the leases, or leases, spread across with these percentages, or you could benefit water and sewer even greater if you wanted to. But that's,
Well, if we could do even greater if we wanted to, does that mean that if we contributed nothing from these, we could still contribute? Our options are our options regardless of what we do, right? We're not tied if we choose not to, or are we?
No, you have that choice. It was mentioned earlier, it's kind of a gray area. It is a little bit gray. It's an old building. The city hasn't always sold water. It hasn't always treated sewer. So it's based on an analysis, and I think it's scientific. It's not perfect, but I think truly the Sewer Enterprise Fund and Water Enterprise Fund benefited from the building, and therefore it should pay something.
and I think that that's kind of the way we, if you look at all the budget items and stuff, this is addressed that same way. There's a certain amount comes out to run City Hall, right? Okay, where do we stand?
I'm going to leave my motion as a.
Okay, and John, your second is?
I'm good with it.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mayor Borelli.
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Patton.
No.
Councilmember Thomas.
Regretfully, no.
Councilmember Wilkins.
Aye.
Okay, passes 3-2. Okay, next is 12.4. Determination by City Council to reopen recruitments for the Historical Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission, or to direct staff to take other action. Mrs. Zito.
At least the title was shorter.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's any less complicated, though. We have, as you're aware, 2 commissions in the city, the Recreation and Parks Commission and the Planning Commission, and 4 committees that we were recruiting for. The recruitment period ended, and in some cases, we didn't net enough candidates to fill the openings that we had. In other situations, we had more candidates than we had vacancies. What became apparent was that we had 2 situations that arose that I don't know if it's ever happened before. The Planning Commission had 3 seats available. 1 planning commissioner decided to retire. 2 incumbents reapplied, as did a former planning commissioner. So we have basically 3 qualified planning commissioners. However, the full council interviews planning commission candidates, and it's totally up to you if you want to reopen and see if you get any other candidates so that there is more of a field of candidates, or if you want to just take the action to appoint the 3 candidates that we have for their 4-year terms. That's like part A. The other situation that happened was at the Historical Advisory Committee. We had the 3 regular terms up. We had 1 term that wouldn't have expired until 2017 resigned. And so we basically ended up with the potential of 5 openings because one of the folks on the Historical Advisory Committee who still has a term that will run until 2017 is the former planning commissioner who was on the Planning Commission. So because of this got a little complicated, I felt it was appropriate to come to the council before we moved forward with setting up interviews. In the case of the Recreation and Park Commission, we have 3 incumbents and all 3 have applied, as well as 2 other candidates. So we can move forward with that one. But if we were going to reopen either the Planning Commission recruitment or the Historical Advisory Committee, I would need to know now so that we can prepare advertising and respond to the candidates that did apply as to what we're going to do. We did have 1 candidate for Historical Advisory Committee, and his application stated he just wanted to get involved in the city. I had asked him if he would be interested in Community Pride. In the case of Community Pride, we had several incumbents reapply and 1 did not. So he could very easily be appointed to that. He said yes, he was interested. I kind of told him that it's more of a worker bee than sitting at a table kind of meetings, and he was good with that too. He's someone who's lived in the community for a number of years, worked at a lot of Main Street businesses. So tonight you have multiple choices. One is if you would like to appoint the 3 Planning Commission candidates without interview. And then 2, with the Historical Advisory Committee, do we reopen that or do we suspend it at this time? And I've spoken to Mr. Rivas about the duties of the Historical Advisory Committee, and I believe that, and he can speak to this, he felt very comfortable that it's something that the Planning Commission could certainly do as part of their duties. The Historical Advisory Committee was created to be advisory to the Planning Commission and the Council. I don't recall that they've ever made a recommendation to the Council. And I don't know if they actually did to the Planning Commission either, but Mr. Rivas was very comfortable with the Planning Commission taking over the duties of what was planned to be the Historical Advisory Committee's role. You'll remember a couple of years ago we adopted the Secretary of Interior's guidelines for historic preservation, and so whether the Planning Commission is following that or whether this subcommittee is following that, we would be able to eliminate or suspend the committee until such time as we felt we really had another need for them. You know, this committee, Historical Advisory, was actually created in 1980, worked for a couple of years, and then was sort of suspended at that point. So it's totally up to you what direction you want to take with that, and then we'll make whatever work. we'd like to get the Recreation and Park Commission interview set up. However, as is usual, our rules and usual protocol is that incumbents continue to serve until such time as the new members are appointed. And I think I have one incumbent here this evening. One is out of state, and they're ready to continue serving until we get the interviews accomplished for Recreation and Park Commission. But if you could discuss this evening how you'd like staff to proceed, we'll take it from there.
Okay. What would you think would be the proper, to do the Historical Advisory Commission first, that item?
That's up to you, but that's one way you can do it if you'd like to, yeah.
And then kind of, go from there. Okay, so let's discuss that. Do we want to take the advice and eliminate that commission and hand it to
Suspend.
suspend that commission
Suspend and then charge
let the
them.
Planning Commission?
Do they have, would we need to have them form their own committee? Well, I had two ideas on this, actually. I know you can't serve on they discourage serving on two. So, but if we were gonna give them the duties, could we have like I'm just concerned that their meetings are gonna go past 10, past 11. How would it be a separate meeting, or would it be just in there, or would they have a subcommittee, 2 planning commissioners that would make up the Historic Advisory Committee?
No, it would be the entire Planning Commission. My idea, or our recommendation, you can do it other ways, but our recommendation is that we simply bring back a resolution at your next meeting which would suspend the Historical Advisory Committee and assign those duties to the Planning Commission indefinitely until something happens, you decide to reform that committee. That's one option, and that's our recommendation. I believe that the Planning Commission can absorb those duties. They were doing them before we had a Historical Advisory Committee. They had that responsibility. So the duties of the Historical Advisory Committee, as mentioned, are simply advisory to the Planning Commission. They wouldn't have that advice. They would have to consider those issues themselves. So.
Well, my question, they can handle it. You think they can handle
I
it?
believe they can. I've talked to Mr. Rivas, and I think he would agree that the Planning Commission could handle those duties.
Yeah, if staff could further point out, when an application comes forward to the city that would require a review by the Historical Advisory Committee, staff prepares a staff report to the advisory committee, to the Historical Advisory Committee, just as it does to the council or to the Planning Commission. So the loss would be maybe a little more fine-grained review by a body that has the expertise in the area. It's not as though staff, lacks that expertise, and I think the commission is a little bit more general in nature as opposed to a body that focuses just on the historic resources. But I think, at least from staff's perspective, we really don't see any issue regarding a loss of the ability to function with that type of review, because they are advisory. They would review and consider that advice and then make the final decision anyway. And on those applications that come to the council, of course, well then it's then further advice that would be considered by the council. So we're not seeing any real tangible loss. And I think because of the amount of applications coming forward, we really weren't seeing a lot of applications coming forward that were required the review by the Historic Advisory Committee. And I think, because of that, they were, some of them maybe felt that, they weren't doing enough or weren't really involved, when it was just the nature of the activity that we have currently within the city, mainly focusing on those projects that happen to fall within one of our historic districts or involve in an historic building or structure.
Any other comments? Okay, John, go ahead.
It's hard to believe, given the amount of discussion we have about hitching posts on Main Street, that there'd be people beating down the door to get onto this committee, and I'm a little surprised by that. I would think that there'd be lots of interest in all of this, so color me shocked. I think suspending it may not be a bad idea.
Wendy?
To that point, I have a question for you, Mr. Rivas. Certainly the biggest historical renovation the last couple of years has been the Herrick Building. How instrumental and what kind of a resource was the Historical Advisory Committee in that project?
I wasn't involved when that project actually went before the Historic Advisory Committee, but that whatever advice he did give was then provided to the Planning Commission, which reviewed the project, reviewed it, and went through a design review process. And so any advice that they would have given regarding the retrofitting of that building would have been considered by the Planning Commission.
Yeah, and certainly would fall to the Planning Commission to, you know, to act.
That's correct.
Right.
And then it would have been analyzed by staff had there not been an historic advisory committee anyway.
Right.
And then we would have used all the resources that the city currently has, you know, mainly being our inventory that has a historical summary of all of our buildings that are that are on that list.
Okay, great. And it certainly seems that in light of us adopting the Department of Interior standards, that what the need for this is perhaps, you know, we can streamline staff's time and still accomplish
I think
what we
that's
set
the
out to do.
whole issue, is that it was, I think it was pretty time-consuming for the staff in addition to, and I think they might have been doing double duty on the projects, and maybe that the time has come to suspend this commission for a time. So can I make that a separate, this is grouped together.
Actually, that would be recommendation number 4.
Right, but this has nothing to do with the Planning Commission.
Well,
So,
only that you're.
so
You can do it in 2 motions if
can
you
I
would
do
like
it?
to.
That's what
Yes.
I'm thinking, that
Yes.
might be a little,
Public comment.
oh, okay.
But, and actually, I had
will,
one
and
comment.
Oh, okay, all right.
And that has to do with the Planning Commission's duties. I think Commissioner Wilkins, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Wilkins, had a comment as to whether or not the Planning Commission can absorb the duties. But back in the day, when there's 4 of us that have served on the Planning Commission when we did the historical advisory duties, if you will. And we utilized other resources in the community. The Heritage Association was a huge resource. And now we have this Department of Interior standards. And so I think that those, I mean, I have to echo what Councilmember Clarici said. It's like, wow, there's so much interest in history, and yet we get no applicants for the Historical Society. So it falls on the people who, you know, who are involved in the planning and in our community development to do the duty, and that's okay, because it certainly has been done that way in the past. It doesn't mean that that might not be the best solution, but it is a solution, and it has been done effectively. And there wasn't a ton of things. The Herrick Building didn't come when we were sitting on the commission, but other ones did that we reviewed. And like I said, just called on different resources in the community to tell me what was a Queen Anne's lace Victorian, because I didn't know, or Queen Anne's. Queen Anne's Victorian. Anyways, so I just wanted to make that comment because former Planning Commissioner Acuna, former Planning Commissioner Washburn, former Planning Commissioner Pierre Rivas, we all sat on there and discussed history. Yeah, and windows and porticos. Porticos.
Yeah.
We're still a historical community.
There
you
is.
It's hard to believe that something of a historical nature will fly under anybody's radar, given where we are here, so.
Nor do we want it to.
No, we
That's
wouldn't.
right.
No.
Well, I was trying to remember, and I'm still trying to remember, why we felt it necessary to recreate the Historical Advisory Commission. And it just seems to me like, and you were saying how we had utilized other, I remember calling on Marilyn Ferguson for advice and stuff. And I thought, what I'm remembering, I thought that they maybe had advised us to have a committee, so that because they weren't official, and I think that was the whole thing. It was, John, help me, you were, and I think that was the whole thing, is that they were not official, and, I'm sorry? Was it after you were here? Is that the reason?
It started, it stopped, and it started.
And I.
That was part of it. It was some pressure from them to form it. You remember then one of the community members and a member of the society, Charlene McCaslin, was one of those.
Yeah,
who was
okay, so that was.
extremely insistent that we.
They were very insistent that we, yeah, okay. So, but it sounds like now that you know, like Pierre was saying, you have the guidelines, and Pierre, are you wanting to, I can't see you. If you want to talk, just give me the signal. Okay, so, anyway, so if that's not going to be a problem, then
Plus, if we have a question, we just ask Stan and he can tell us. That's where I
Okay.
always go.
Okay.
That
At
leads
this
to
ti-
another question, actually.
Okay.
I'm still.
Okay.
Isn't it true that they all have to be, is it that every single vacancy or every seat has to own property within a historic district? Or are there?
Well, this particular committee had, I think they went more than residency, well, Cleve could speak to that, more than residency, it went for professions. We have an architect, a general contractor, who may not have been too busy that many years ago and are certainly busy running their own businesses now. We had, you know, Joanne Rogers was very much into history, and she did own a parcel of land which she sold, so she no longer qualified. She didn't have a city connection. So yeah, there was a combination of the professions which did not, I don't believe, had to have the city residency, and and then residents. We usually have that combination of, you know, residents are always included, and the resident, one of the residents was a resident of the Carey House, and his job assignment took him elsewhere. So, in the time that we've had this, which hasn't been all that long, we've had to fill unexpired terms that have come up for this committee. So it's been tough to keep it filled.
Yeah. Okay, this time I will ask for public comment.
Hello, Dolly.
Sorry.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Hi, I'm Mary. No, Dolly Wager, citizen and ex-planning commissioner, who was on the planning commission when we formed the historical advisory. So I thought I would come up and give you a little bit of what I remember and answer some of the questions of the impact in bringing it back to the planning commission. So one of the reasons that it was it was suggested that we form the historical advisories because we did have these unofficial advisors. We went to the historical committee, and what was happening is they were being less and less available to do it. And we're not being able to show up at the meetings, and we're not being able, it was like one or two people who would be able to meet with the applicant and give them advice, and there was no, you have to do it. So what was happening is that they were coming to the Planning Commission not quite prepared. One of the other issues, and someone can correct me if this is not right, one of the other issues was there was question about possibly forming a another district downtown, and they, I believe, John, you were on it at that time, were looking at that as well, and that was one of the big issues in the very beginning, that the Planning Commission it didn't seem appropriate for them to do that. In terms of taking it back to the Planning Commission, having been a planner at a time when there was not a lot of building, there were a lot of meetings that were skipped because we just didn't have a meeting. So what would happen was an applicant would go to the Historical Advisory Committee, then basically come to the Planning Commission for another review of it. So it seemed like another layer. As long as the Planning Commission is not meeting and full the 2 times it is meeting, it seems like something that they could absorb. The other thing that happened during the time that I was there was we adopted the state regulations, and that made a big difference. And what was kind of happening sometimes is the Planning Commission would at one point would say, okay, we'll make an exception to this. And then we had this Historical Advisory Committee, and they weren't making those exceptions. So it was there wasn't a consistency. I think if there becomes a lot of issues that are coming forward or new things, you would definitely want to put together some type of advisory, but at the time I don't see a problem in suspending it.
Thank you, Dolly. That eases my mind because I knew there was more that I was not remembering, and you stirred it all up again. Anyone else care to come forward?
Good evening, Jackie No. I just wanted to know, you have had a situation like this. 4 years ago, I was the only application to the Park and Rec Commission, and I was just appointed. You didn't reopen that up. So I was just letting you know that they have had that. And as far as the committee goes, you know, if you don't have the public interest for that, that's a lot of staff time that you don't need to spend if we don't need it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, I will bring it back to council, and I'm going to do a separate vote on this one.
I'll make a motion, Madam Mayor, that we suspend the Historical Advisory Committee effective today and shift the duties to the Planning Commission.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we will talk about the other issue about the Planning Commission. Who wants to comment?
I'll start. I think that Planning Commission, especially in light of the action that we just took, is a really important part of our public process and the development of our community, especially as things are turning around now. And I think it bears reopening so that we have you know, a renewed a field of candidates in order to choose from. And I also think that with 2 new council members, that it's very, very important that they are involved in the interview process, because it helps get to know who our commission is and lend their voice to how that is, you know, seated. So with that, I would be in favor of reopening it and having a full interview with the council.
Okay, John?
I agree with that in the sense that since I wasn't part of that process, obviously, before, it's important. And even if we only end up with 3, I'd still like to talk to the 3 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Carol?
That's fine.
Okay, Tricia?
Yeah.
Well, that's my vote too, so I'm going to ask for public comment.
Mark Acuna, Placerville. Carol, thank you very much for the flashback to the windows. You're right, Planning Commission's days when we put on the historical hat was always, we learned a lot about windows and real divided lights. And in that light, you can groan, Mr. Clarici. I think the Planning Commission is a very exceptional sounding board, if you will, and I think it's very important that the fact that there is a new council makeup, because the role that the planning commissioners do play in developing and guiding, they have direct hands-on projects that they alone approve that don't come to the council unless there is an appeal. And so you really want to make sure that the individuals that you have on that planning commission are committed, have a desire to serve and understand that full role of representing this community and representing how this community should grow moving forward. So I'll leave it to you to decide whether you can interview the 3 you have now or ask for more, but I would strongly encourage you to interview all of your candidates in the regular forum where the public can be a part of that, and allow the new council members to have their opportunity to ask their specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council.
I'll make a motion that we direct staff to reopen recruitments for the Planning Commission.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. And how are you going to go about that?
I work with Mr. Morris tomorrow, and we, real honestly, I think with the Planning Commission reopening, it gets more focused than when we put out a media release. I might even see if I can bend Mr. Warren's arm about getting in the March utility bill, if there's a possibility.
And Wendy, I'm sure it'll make the headlines, right, in the Democrat?
Front page, above the fold.
I think it'll be more
half.
highlighted. We may, in fact, attract more candidates. So I appreciate your input on this, and I'll be contacting you all about getting those interviews set up for the Rec and Park Commission first.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, council reports from other agency meetings. El Dorado Transit,
Did not have a meeting.
El Dorado Transportation,
Oh, I already did that?
LAFCO,
Actually, Councilmember Clarici
Oh, yes.
did LAFCO 101.
LAFCO, tons of fun. And what they did was basically it was a primer for folks like me who had not experienced LAFCO, Local Agency Formation Commission, and they're kind of this interesting group, very important. So there really isn't much to report. Like they didn't do anything like insane or crazy, but it was a very interesting and very worthwhile for me to go and listen to that stuff. So, and I'm actually on the ad hoc budget committee because I have found the best way to figure out a place is to find out where their money comes from, and some of it comes from here, in fact. So, so that was that.
Okay, SACOG.
Okay, kind of a little bit like deja vu again. The MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, was the primary subject of the meeting down there. It was last Thursday. And essentially what they're going through now is just how the plan is developed, even though a lot of folks have already been part of that are on the board of directors. The really interesting thing I think for us is that the state is definitely looking at ways to kind of reorient transportation funding, not new money, that's kind of out there, but going more towards operations and maintenance of existing systems rather than capital improvement. With the shifting demographics of the state, it is obvious that although there still be growth pressures on all parts of the transportation system, that the issues of maintenance especially are becoming first and foremost for most communities, obviously including this one. And the idea of self-help, i.e. sales tax, is, I just lowered myself, is very important. The other thing I want to share with you, a factoid, just so that you know, kind of how special this community that we live in is. Placerville has more jobs in it than there are people living in it. There's this thing called jobs to housing ratio. It's very important in regional planning. And this is an estimate, of course, but there are approximately 12,000 jobs in this town, believe it or not, and only 5,000, slightly more than 5,000 households. And of course, we all know the population is around 10,000 people. So that means there's actually a job for every man, woman, and child, which is absolutely remarkable. I mean, it is remarkable. It's kind of funny, but it is remarkable. There are towns in this region that would give precious much to have that happening. It's not something to be taken lightly, in fact. And it is a position that puts us, it's a unique place to be. So when people tell you that there's nothing going on in this town, they're just plain wrong. So anyway, that's something to know about. Actually, a little second factoid, and I'm going to just do this off the top of my head. I should have actually done the math before I came here. Approximately 20 to 25%, and it's somewhere in that range of jobs in El Dorado County on the west slope, not including Lake Tahoe, are in this town, even though we only have 5% of the population. So just nibble on that for a second.
Okay, SEDCOR would be me, and we were supposed to have a special meeting, and unfortunately not enough people could attend, so it was canceled, and so I have no report. Okay, request for future agenda items.
I just wanted to bring something up, and I have a question. I've gotten a lot of complaints about the feed. I know we had Justin TV a couple years ago, and that one
About what,
had its
Tricia?
problem. The way it's broadcast to the people, the feed.
Oh, okay.
Right now, the way it works right now is they're watching, and it goes to a commercial. But it doesn't go to a commercial and then now back to your regularly scheduled programming. They miss that chunk out of it. And it is really frustrating. I'm experiencing it live, so I don't have that frustration, but I hear it. So I don't know, can we look at, there's gotta be a better way. I mean, this is like 1998 technology, it sounds like.
Heaven forbid.
You don't want to miss a minute of this.
Or maybe we should break for commercials during the meeting. We can sell advertising space. You know, we can make money.
There you go, John, good idea.
No, I'm sorry, not to make light of it. That is actually very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
I had no idea.
Can I just mention, we have looked at options. In fact, we have something, but it is a cost item, and for this one, we were waiting till the budget to bring that back to you.
Okay.
If you
We're
would
not
like
gonna
to
take
see
any
it
more
earlier,
money out of
I'd be happy to bring it to you earlier.
Let's do it tonight.
I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it, because, like, we don't know. We don't watch it.
Exactly.
Who watches it? I mean, live, but yeah, so I
Saturday
didn't-
mornings.
I just didn't know. Well, it's the live feed. They post it to the website
Oh, the
the
web-
next day,
okay.
and that's great. You can watch
Yeah.
it seamlessly. But people who are at home that can't make it, just come sit here, they're missing huge chunks of it every time they go to a commercial. So I don't know. I just want to make sure you guys know.
Yeah, the current service is free.
Yeah.
That's why it's
From
free.
1998.
But yeah. So,
Okay, thank you.
1998 is.
would you like that brought back?
No, I
immediately?
just wanted, I didn't know if anybody knew.
Okay.
Because I've
we
been
did,
getting
yeah.
people.
I didn't know,
didn't know
Tricia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
The
any,
man behind the wall could explain it to us better, but
The Wizard of Oz.
any other requests? Okay, city manager and staff reports.
I don't believe any of my staff, I have one item that I need to bring up. As you recall, last year in the budget, we included the cost of one person to attend, to go to cap, and that was considered as part of, in the past 2 years, I believe, EDCTC has paid for half of a person and the city has paid for half. So we did include that in our budget. As reported last meeting by Councilmember Thomas, I believe, stated that this year EDCTC is sending one member.
Two supervisors.
That's right, 2 supervisors only, and a city member is not attending. I think that was, we were fine with that. We did not
We opted
attend.
out of it.
We opted not to.
We felt as though Brian
Right.
could
Yes.
represent us.
Right. So Councilmember Wilkins has approached me and has requested and is interested in attending cap to cap on behalf of the city, and has stated that she is willing to pay half of the cost. So the city would only pay the half that is currently budgeted for someone to attend cap to cap. Because of the timing, I'm bringing this to you tonight and stating that I'm going to exercise my authority to approve that for her, unless one of you tonight says you have a concern, in which case I would bring it back on the next agenda. The reason I'm doing that tonight is because we can still make the priority deadline if I go ahead with it tonight. So it's not on your agenda. I can't ask for approval, but I will move, letting you know I'm moving forward with that unless I hear anything within the next day or two. So if there's any comments you'd like to provide, or if you want to provide comments tonight, that's fine also.
My only concern was what Wendy and I talked about last time, is that there's really nothing to gain by going back this year. I mean, and we talked to David Turch and Madeline, and they're indicating that there's not too much other than transportation, and we kind of felt as though that Brian and Shiva are, we're handling that from transport. And I don't, I have no objection to you going, except that I just wonder, that's a lot of money for you to put out and for the city to, other than gain the experience of cap to cap. I'm not too sure whether the money would be better spent sending you to like a League of California Cities convention or something, like that. That's just my thoughts. I don't know I don't know. That would be the only thing that my concern.
I just have a brief comment and
Okay.
just applaud your willingness to
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
pay your half. That's wonderful. And I think if you want to do that, that's great. What I would like to do in the next budget cycle, looking forward, is I would like to have us all to have a discussion this next year as part of our budget workshop as to what we think is most beneficial to our city using our taxpayer dollars and our budget items. And I'd like us to have honest conversations about cap to cap, about the study missions the chamber puts on, about the League of Cities, and all the opportunities we have to not only connect with our regional partners, which is so vitally important,
Right.
as well as be informed on issues, which helps us make better decisions, and as well as to grow in our own leadership abilities. So I look forward to that discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I know that there's opportunities for us to go to the leadership. That's another thing that I think everybody benefits from. And we really haven't set any budgeted amount, other than us just coming and asking at a certain time.
We had a budget item this year.
We
No,
did.
but what I mean is for different,
Oh, right.
you know, different categories. You wanna-
And I agree with getting more involved with the league especially.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to point out for this item, last year, the representative that got half paid for the city, that was not budgeted.
Right.
They went, we paid the half, and then I'm assuming there was a perceived benefit because then we then budgeted it for this year. So last year during our budget, we as a council said there is benefit to going, and now I'm hearing that you're saying that there isn't.
Oh, no, I didn't, last year, I believe Wendy went, and again, she also went for and it was all about, it seems like the last few years have been all about transportation. You know, there's no money out there for anything, that's the problem, and we don't have a specific, you know, area to target, at least I got an email not too long ago from Madeline, and she seemed to indicate that there's.
I think what you're saying is the rules have kind of changed back there. You used to be able to go back and when the Driscoll discount tours went, the
Tricia,
rules
that's one you should have gone
rules in
with
Washington
John.
were a little
was that-
different. You could actually, you know, get funding opportunities.
Because we didn't go on cap to cap weekend, we went on our own, and he got us into.
I would have loved it.
Yeah, that would have been.
So anyway, my point is, after our representative returned last time, we still budgeted it, so there must have been some need, and so I'm volunteering. I still am volunteering my own funds to go, and in addition to what we already have budgeted, the half. So I hope that you guys approve this.
So that would be, so just the amount, just what we have budgeted.
Yeah, what was already budgeted.
And then you'll
last
cover
year.
everything else.
Yes. No problem.
When
Gladly.
exactly is the cap to cap? It's like April?
April
It's
18th.
Nick-
to
it's in
it's coming
April.
up,
It's
and the
coming up.
registration deadline is on the 1st.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have 3 days, pretty much.
And I saw in the Sacramento Bee, I think their attendance has fallen a bit. When we used to do it, it was well over 400 people would go, and they've only got 300 going this year. So I think a lot of, in fact, Tricia, your friend from Woodland, we had quite a discussion, and he and I talked about, and he said he wasn't going to go. He didn't think it was worth it.
Oh, he's going. He
You're-
sent me all, he's already,
changed his
he's
mind then.
registered.
He told me he wasn't going to go.
Oh, he's going, he sent me his program. I'm excited to go.
Good, well, good, you'll have somebody there that you know,
Yeah, he
so
knows the ropes.
that'll be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
is that it?
That's all.
Okay, upcoming items. Items tentatively scheduled for the next regularly scheduled city council meeting on March 10th include mid-year budget report, confirmation of committee and commission appointments, Johnson Controls Energy Efficiency Study, Mayor's State of the City Address, Dockin Agreement, Park and Ride Western Placerville Interchanges, Western Placerville Interchanges Phase 2, EDCTC Co-op Agreement, PACE Program, Police Department Roof Project, Crime Statistics, and the Water Sewer Rate Study.
Yes.
So start sleeping.
Start now. Boy Scouts back there. They need to come to that.
So with that, I will adjourn until that lengthy meeting.